What is the best state to live in the United States? Is it Texas? Is it California? Maybe New York? Or is it Florida?
So over the last several weeks, I did a series of polls on the channel where I asked you guys what you think are the best states in each given region of the United States. Well, the votes are in. The people have spoken. And on this video, we're going to go through the results of those polls and talk about some reasons why people like these states so much. And I'll also go through some of you guys' comments on what you thought about the states that were chosen. Hit that like button, subscribe if you love the content, and let's talk about America's best states. We'll start out with the Midwest, and while there is some contention on which states define these regions, I like standards and uniformity, so we're going to use the federal government definitions of these regions. The runner-up for best state in the Midwest is Ohio. Ohio is located at the southeastern corner of the region with a 2020 population of almost 11.8 million, up 2.3% from its 2010 population, which is one of the slowest in the U.S. Its capital is Columbus, and its largest metro area is Cincinnati, though all three of its largest metros, Cincinnati, Columbus, and Cleveland, are very close in population. Now, the best state in the Midwest, as voted by you guys, is the land of 10,000 lakes, Minnesota. Minnesota is the northernmost Midwestern state. In 2020, Minnesota had a population of 5.70 million, up 7.6% from 2010. Its capital city is St. Paul, which, along with its largest city of Minneapolis, forms the state's largest metro, commonly called the Twin Cities. In 2020, the Twin Cities had a population of 3.69 million, up 10.3% from 2010. They're actually one of the faster growing metro areas of the Midwest, a region where most other metros are either stagnant or losing population. So why do people like Minnesota? Well, the first is the low cost of living. Compared to large metros on the coast and in the southeast, Minneapolis is quite affordable. It's easier and cheaper to get a nice home or apartment here than other large metros. Other reasons include a great economy, as jobs are plentiful in the Twin Cities with the strong presence of many major corporations. The cost of healthcare and transportation in Minnesota is also lower than many other states. Then if you're one of those folks who happen to love the pain of a long, freezing winter, then Minnesota has plenty of that. Now, what do some of you guys in the comments have to say about what makes Minnesota so great? Lefty says, oh yeah, you betcha, Minnesota. Richard Steiner says, I loved living in various Minneapolis suburbs, and I wish I was back up there. The Atlanta metro area isn't a bad place, but it's not the same. Realistic Timberwolves fan, a fitting name, says, from Minnesota, now living in Chicago. If you could somehow put Chicago in Minnesota, that would be ideal. Robert 1677 says, I drove across southern Minnesota a few months ago. It seemed pretty nice. And someone responded with, even better in the Twin Cities and up north. And Jason Knight says, well, it certainly isn't. Trust me. I lived there for 22 years. The crime in the last 4 years has gotten out of control, and everyone doesn't want to talk about it, because that would be bad for tourism and it would bring their home values down. Interesting. And Badger Cheese says, Minnesota. Lived here nearly 6.5 years ago and love it. Now, my personal thoughts on Minnesota. Well, personally, the entire Midwest is a little too cold for me to want to live in. But if I had to choose, it would probably be between Minneapolis and Chicago. I visited Minnesota in the summer when it was still warm, and I was quite impressed with this lakes, outdoor active culture, as well as the extensive biking infrastructure. Duluth on Lake Superior was also quite the experience. And of course, the state fair, which is a whole vibe in itself. It seems that the entire state of Minnesota descends into St. Paul for that event. The people were very friendly and treated me well while I was in town. When it's warm, it's awesome. But the long, cold winters will be a non-starter for me, though I know some people do love shoveling snow in March. Next up, we'll go over to the Northeast, where the runner-up was Massachusetts. Sitting at the heart of the New England sub-region of the Northeast, Massachusetts had a population in 2020 of 7.03 million, up 7.4% from 2010. The capital and largest metro area is Boston, which had 4.94 million people in 2020. And the best state in the Northeast, as voted by the people, is Pennsylvania. In 2020, Pennsylvania had a population of 13 million, up 2.4% from 2010. The capital is Harrisburg, and the largest metro area is Philadelphia, with a metro population of 6.24 million in 2020. What do people like about Pennsylvania? Well, first we'll talk about its largest cities. Philadelphia is one of America's oldest cities with lots of history and culture to explore. It's also one of the metros in the country that has a large amount of walkable areas and a better developed transit network. Major highways like I-95 and the New Jersey Turnpike pass through the metro to further increase its impressive mobility. The Schuykill is another story, but we already talked about that disaster in another video that is linked in the description if you want to check that out. On the other side of the state is Pittsburgh, with a 2020 population of 2.37 million, up just slightly at 0.6% from 2010, the first decade of growth after 50 straight years of population decline. But don't sleep on Pittsburgh. The area is beautiful and the cost of living is lower than many more popular metros. Your dollar will go much further here in terms of housing, as is the case with many Rust Belt metros. Outside of the cities, you've got some seriously beautiful nature to explore in the state. Tons of rivers, forests, and mountains such as the Poconos await those who choose to live in Pennsylvania. Now, what do you guys in the comments have to say about Pennsylvania? Court Match says beautiful countryside, like in the central part of the state where I live. And this same user also said, as a Pennsylvanian, I am flattered by these results. Johnny Menninger says, I'm originally from PA, born in Allentown, the first half of my childhood in Bethlehem, and then later as an adult in Philadelphia. My parents were raised in Bucks County and went to Muhlenberg in Penn. My wife is from New York City. Most of my adult life, I've lived in a number of other states and have traveled everywhere. I might have some bias, but PA was an easy choice for me. I might have stayed there, but I had to see about a girl. Oh yeah, those girls will make guys do crazy things. And Rocco09 says, we vacation to the Poconos in Pennsylvania every year and absolutely love it there. Elijah Rock says, multiple family trips, even spent my honeymoon there. Believe it or not, my wife and I like the low-key, slow pace and quietness of that area over city/suburban life. Plus, that region is about as far north as we could compromise. LOL. And then M. Lee says, I think compared to the surrounding towns, Lancaster has a lively community. Businesses tend to do well in the area, and I like how close it is to other cities. It's quaint, unique, and still has access to the amenities of a big city life. Then Alex says, Western Pennsylvania, where someone responded, any county surrounding Allegheny is perfect. You can get into the city in under an hour, while also being able to get to the middle of nowhere in a very pretty part of the world, just by going the opposite direction for a few minutes. And then PJ Flynn says, Pennsylvania is my favorite state in the entire union. Okay. I can't express enough just how beautiful the architecture and overall incredible vibe is. Lancaster makes me sob when I walk down the porchfront row home streets. I love it so much. And then Simple Man Channel says, if you ever visit again, check out Littitz. It's been named as one of the best small towns in the U.S. It's about a 25-minute drive north of Lancaster City. And we have another comment about Lancaster from Joe Miglory. Lancaster, PA is a wonderful place to live. It's affordable by Northeastern standards, beautiful, clean, and it's close to everything on the East Coast from DC to New York City. There's even regular Amtrak to Philly and New York. Okay, Lancaster. And now my personal view on Pennsylvania. I won't mention the weather again, as you guys already are aware that I'm not a big cold weather guy. But if I had to choose, I think I'd pick the Pittsburgh area. There's just something about the architecture and design of a large metro sitting up in the mountains that fascinates me. Those bridges, the houses on the hills, and I didn't even get to see it when it was green yet. And up next is the Great American West. The map here is all the states that are included in the region. The runner-up, just narrowly beating California out, was the state of Washington. Washington had a 2020 population of 7.71 million, up 14.6% from 2010. So it's growing quite a bit. The capital city is Olympia, and the largest metro area is Seattle, of which Olympia is a part of. In 2020, the Seattle metro had 4.02 million people, more than half of the state's population, which was also good for a 16.8% increase over its 2010 population. And the best state in the Western US, according to you guys, is Colorado. In 2020, Colorado had a population of 5.77 million, up 14.8% from its 2010 population. Denver is the capital and also the state's largest metro area, with a 2020 population of 2.96 million, up 16.53% from 2010. Why do people love Colorado? Well, first off, the natural beauty. Colorado is known for its Rocky Mountain landscape. In the winter, it has some of the best ski slopes the country has to offer. In the summer, there is plenty of hiking and other outdoor activities to be had. So basically, Colorado is a place where one can live a year-round active lifestyle. It's no coincidence that places like Denver and Colorado Springs rank among the most fit cities in the country. The job market is strong in the state. You won't have trouble finding opportunity here, as long as you have some skills, of course. Denver offers all 5 major sports teams, so there's plenty of entertainment to be had. And breweries are everywhere, if that's your thing. And of course, we can't talk about Colorado without talking about legalization. Colorado was the first state to do it, and the industry is well developed here. Dispensaries are everywhere, and it's not uncommon to see people smoking openly. No wonder the people in Colorado are so chill and relaxed. On the transportation front, Denver is well served by the interstate highway system. It has a pretty sweet light rail system and boasts the largest airport geographically in the United States. Now let's take a look at what the people had to say about Colorado. Sir Black says, I live in Colorado in the foothills of the Rockies. It's beautiful and expensive. And Fishing with Lala says same, and I agree all around. Music Mike said nothing like having those mountains as a backdrop. So said, love Colorado, but I feel like it's too cold for me. Eric the 82 says, only because of skiing and hiking opportunities did I pick Colorado, not because they are doing anything correctly. Connor says, no, don't move to Colorado. Too many people are moving here. Traffic has gotten so much worse. Sab says they all have legal weed. Any one of those would be good. The unpopular Cuber says Colorado seems the most similar to my home state of Wisconsin in terms of climate, so I'll go with that. Way to go, Wisconsin. The Sky Guy says Colorado because of the natural beauty and because it's not on a fault line like California or Washington. Oh, that's actually a very good point. And now my thoughts on Colorado. So I personally visited Denver back in early 2023, and despite the cold weather, it was a great place. The people were very laid back and friendly. The infrastructure seemed well built up around the city, and there were lots of food and bar options. All the dispensaries and people smoking openly can be a culture shock at first, as you don't see much of this anywhere else in the country. Another shock is the elevation. I went to the gym and found myself breathing heavily just from walking on the treadmill at first. So that elevation difference is real. One thing I did notice was that Denver did seem to have a significant homeless population in the downtown area. But overall, Denver was awesome and is one of those places that I'm personally considering moving to if I can take those cold winters. And I wouldn't mind trying out skiing and hiking in Colorado's mountains. But we'll see what happens. And finally, we'll look at what seems to be the most controversial but also the most popular region for discussion, and that is none other than the southern United States. Now, many Americans like to debate what is and what isn't the South, which I talked about in this video, which is linked in the description. But as I said before, I like adhering to standards, and for that reason, we're going to go with the regions as defined by the US government. And that's what you see on this map. So let's get into it. The runner-up on the list, the second best state in the South, is none other than Texas, the Lone Star State. Official 2020 census numbers for Texas are 29.1 million in 2020, up 15.9% from 2010. But the latest estimates say that it has broken the 30 million mark in 2023, which means it is creeping up on first place California. The state capital is Austin. The largest metro is Dallas. And the largest city population is Houston. In 2020, the Dallas-Fort Worth area had 7.64 million people, up 18.8% from 2010, making it the 4th largest metro area in the United States, only behind the big 3 of New York, LA, and Chicago. Texas is a wildly popular state, adding more people than any other state in 2023, and is known for its booming job market and economy. It is also loved by many for its low cost of living compared to places like New York and California, as well as not having any state income tax. Now, in the moment you've all been waiting for, the best state in the South and the best state in the entire country, as chosen by you guys, is none other than the Tar Heel state, North Carolina. North Carolina is also a very fast growing state. Its 2020 population put it at 10.4 million, good for 9th in the country. This is up 9.5% from its 2010 population. The capital is Raleigh, while its most populous metro is Charlotte, which had 2.66 million people in 2020, up 18.6% from the 2010 population that it had. Why do people love North Carolina? Well, the weather is great, all 4 seasons, but the winter isn't too cold and the summer isn't too hot. Then North Carolina has probably the most important thing of all. It has the jobs. The job market is incredible. The Raleigh and Durham Research Triangle area has become a major tech hub, while Charlotte now boasts the second largest finance presence in the U.S. after New York. Then you've got the highest mountains east of the Mississippi in the state, while you have the famous Outer Banks on the coast. You also have America's busiest national park by far, Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The cost of living is still reasonable despite the large population increase in recent decades. People can come on down to North Carolina and still afford their dream home. That is no longer in reach in many other parts of the country. Down here, our traffic flows well. The roads are in great shape. The largest cities of Raleigh and Charlotte still have plenty of parks and trees and have not become concrete jungles. The Triad area has what is perhaps the best flowing traffic of any metro in the country. North Carolina heavily invests in its infrastructure with many planned highways to keep residents moving as many continue to relocate here. Big transit expansions are planned in the Charlotte area, and regional rail connections are in the long-term planning stages for giving the state better connections to Atlanta and Washington, D.C. With most of the growth in North Carolina being recent, you'll also notice that a lot of the infrastructure is shiny, new, and clean compared to many older cities. If you've ever been to the Midwestern cities, then you can't help but notice the contrast when you're in a place like Raleigh. Also, unlike neighboring Georgia, the state isn't completely dominated by one single metro. While Charlotte is indeed the largest metro, one could also live in smaller metros like the Raleigh-Durham Triangle area or the Greensboro-Winston-Salem Triad area and still have most of the amenities that can be found in Charlotte. Charlotte has the NFL, NBA, and Major League Soccer, while the Triangle has the NHL and the college sports teams. And speaking of the Triangle, one can't forget about the region having not one, not two, but three powerhouse universities right there in close proximity. One of those schools boasting perhaps the most impressive men's basketball program in history, while that other team in Durham, I guess, can be okay at times too. But that's the conversation for another day. And don't sleep on Charlotte's up-and-coming university. It does have quite the engineering program. I mean, what can I say? Asheville, Greenville, and Wilmington might be worth a look if you prefer something smaller, but the job markets in those areas are not quite as robust. Many so-called halfbacks, those who move from the Northeast to Florida, typically find themselves ultimately in North Carolina after experiencing Florida's hyperhumidity and higher cost of living. Overall, North Carolina might truly have everything except for a true mega city, if that's what you're looking for. Now, Charlotte certainly does aspire to be that, but it's going to be a while. Luckily, Washington, D.C. isn't that far if you're in the Triangle, and Atlanta is doable if you're closer to Charlotte. But let's see what the people had to say about North Carolina. Ryafi says, I live in North Carolina, never anywhere else. It's where the beauty of the ocean and the mountains meet. Smith Jimmy says, Outer Banks. Richard in North Carolina says, I've lived in North Carolina for 45 years. Now retired, no reason to move anywhere. Madison M says, nice to see North Carolina winning since I'm moving there in 8 days. Then Breaking says, prepare for the hot, overly humid summers. And FT Bath says, that's overhyped. It's not that bad. Chris Morgan says, I've lived in 3 of those states, and if I had to pick, I would go back to the Outer Banks in North Carolina in half a heartbeat. I loved it there. The Outer Banks are pretty nice. Drifter says, assuming that I don't have to worry about money problems, then I would love to live in Florida. If I had to worry about the money, then it'll be North Carolina or Texas. Yeah, Florida can be quite expensive. Omar Rowley says, North Carolina, almost as many beaches and barrier islands as Florida, a booming economy without much of the flashiness of Atlanta, Georgia, even bigger mountains than Tennessee, nowhere near as hot and flat as Texas. How could you not choose North Carolina? And I live in Georgia, by the way. Oh, he makes some great points. Missionary Universalist says, North Carolina forever and ever. Zeus Pagan says, North Carolina, not too city or too country, not too hot or too cold, not too rich or too poor. LOL, quite literally the best location in the South. I can agree. Shadow says, as soon as I can convince my wife to move to North Carolina, I'm going. Mountains in the west, gorgeous beaches in the east, can't be beat. Then Juba Baby says, Outer Banks in North Carolina and Eastern Shore in Virginia are the best beaches around. Don't even get me started on my love for the Blue Ridge, best states ever. And Insightful Rhodium says, amazing mountains in the west, megalopolis cities in the Piedmont, and amazing beaches in the east. What else could you want in a state? And ADR Vlogs says, North Carolina is just the best. We have got it all. Then Arcade says, I get why Texas is so high, taxes, jobs, and housing, but what's up with North Carolina? And David Casey Kelly says, North Carolina is where it's at. It already has it all, but it's still improving. Auburn fan since 2010 says North Carolina is the hardest state in America right now. Everyone is moving there. He's right about that. Everyone is moving there. King of L's says, I live in Western North Carolina since the beginning of the pandemic, got happily stuck here, and never went back to New York City. Definitely recommend it here. And it's my number one choice. Been to Texas and Tennessee, would definitely choose Tennessee over Texas. Not for culture or politics, but just for natural beauty. Love living here in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Western North Carolina and have no desire to move. But if I did, it would be to the Tennessee side of the Appalachian Mountains. And OLEDs says, I already live in North Carolina and it is great. So why should I move? A fair point. And David Casey Kelly again says North Carolina and it is not even close. KJH says North Carolina is absolutely beautiful. Surprised to see it was the top choice though, considering its popularity compared to the rest of those states. You and me both. I honestly did not expect North Carolina to win this. And there it is, guys, the best states in the US. Minnesota in fourth, Pennsylvania in third, Colorado second, and North Carolina number one. Now, there was someone in the comments who suggested that North Carolina was overrepresented on the channel, which led to it winning this poll. But you'll be surprised. Looking at the analytics, North Carolina is actually seventh as far as where the views for this channel comes from. So even I was personally surprised to see it beat out Texas. But then again, I will say that when I'm traveling around the country and I tell people that I meet that I'm from North Carolina, their eyes usually light up and they praise how great of a place it is, or how they would love to live there themselves. So it appears that North Carolina has earned itself quite the favorable view among a large number of Americans. But let me know what you guys think about the results below. I'll see you on the next one, coming soon to a town near you.